Landon, first off, thank you so much for joining us. I'm pretty sure it's hard to take some time out of your day when the weather is as beautiful as it is outside.
Yeah, as you can see, you might hear some birds chirping and dogs barking in the background. Hopefully that just adds to the value of the show.
Oh, no, it's like, instead of like having to pay for sounds of birds and nature, we just get it for free from the ambient noise. Yeah, there you go. You're adding value, so much value to this podcast.
That's awesome.
So, Landon, an interesting fact that we kind of found out, Mark really did the digging on this one, is you've driven for 21 different team owners in your career. That's quite a lot. Obviously, you don't burn bridges.
All three series, or just
in all three? Yes, 21.
Yeah. So you're obviously able to play this the politics of the sport very well, and be able to have a good face with your name, because people obviously want you to drive their cars. So what goes into that, that aspect of the sport, having to play the kind of politics of being the face and name in the sport?
I don't know. I mean, it is been an interesting journey, to say the least. I think that one of the biggest things that I've always done with teams is I've always presented myself as a driver. I've never presented myself into a prospective ride as someone that had money attached to them, or hey, if I bring this sponsor, will you put me in your car? I've always sort of framed everything and every job opportunity as I'm a professional driver for hire. We'll negotiate my rate, and if there's sponsorship that comes along, then we'll put that together too. So, I've been with organizations and teams where sponsorship followed me to the team, but I've never presented myself in such a way that this sponsorship was dependent on whether or not I got the job. And that's just been part of my business model as a driver for so long, because I knew that over the years that if sponsors are going to come and go, but the one thing I always have is myself as a driver and how I can work for that team. So that's really hard to do nowadays. I mean, in some cases, you just flat out have to have sponsorship to be in a car. And there's a lot of cases where even some of the best drivers are just not going to get the ride unless there's sponsorship attached. But I would say, at least, through a time period in the sport where out of 40 cars in the field, at least half of them were still professionally hired drivers. I've been able to fill some gaps that way.
So we want to talk a bit just about growing up. So like you're from Iowa originally, and what was the racing scene like in Iowa? So I live in Canada, so like we don't have racing here. Well, we do, but like there's like 5 people in the corner that race. So what was the racing scene like growing up in Iowa? And obviously you did a lot of karting. I know people come up different ways, but you were doing karting on dirt and on asphalt and road courses. And what was that scene like growing up?
It was a lot of racing. I grew up in the family car business and loved racing. Went to the races every weekend with my dad at Hawkeye Downs Speedway, and grew up racing a little bit of everything. So in Iowa, there's a lot of dirt racing. The asphalt racing around was pretty few and far between. It was just Hawkeye Downs Speedway. So, but when I got into full size cars, I got into asphalt racing, and went that direction, and then went into ASA late model and touring late models around the country from there. And that was really, at the time, the best pathway to get noticed by teams and manufacturers.
And did you consider doing the dirt sprint car thing? Because obviously, with the Knoxville Nationals and whatnot, and all that being so popular out there, was that something you ever considered doing?
Dirt sprint cars, not so much early on. A lot of it was just kind of the timing and my age. I was really young when we were kind of ready to move up into full size cars, and I was 14. And you had to be at least 16 to race at any of the dirt tracks in a full size car. But I had kind of felt like we had kind of run our course in terms of the go-karts and things like that. So having Hawkeye Down Speedway right there in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, willing to let me race at the age of 14 was kind of the deciding factor.
Something you've mentioned in the past, from ages 14 to 17, you've stated that there were a lot of manufacturer eyeballs in the sport and present for developmental deals. Explain kind of how the scene was when you were coming up, 14 through 17, kind of towards where it is today with the manufacturer support for developing drivers and also driver development.
I think the manufacturers were searching for drivers pretty openly back then. The teams were searching for drivers. I mean, I participated in multiple tests. I tested for Toyota and Bill Davis Racing. I really the test that that got me my first gig at Hendrick Motorsports was a Chevy driver development deal. So the GM put together almost like a driver combine where every Chevy supported team and Cup recruited 2 drivers to represent them. They all sent representatives to the test. There were like 16 drivers there, which included Joey Logano, Ryan Hunter-Reay, some pretty legit drivers. I think Bobby Santos might have been there. I can't remember. Well, he might have been a Toyota guy at the time. But there were some really big names that have made careers out of racing that were in these tests. And we ran on a short track, we ran on a dirt track, and then we ran at the Nashville Super Speedway in cars that were prepared by RCR. And every driver got a chance to drive the car, meet the other representatives from other Chevy teams. I was there. Myself and Ryan Hunter-Reay were there, invited by Hendrick Motorsports. And at the end of the test, Hendrick offered me a contract and offered me a ride.
Like, who would you say out of that crop of guys you were with, like, is probably the one that you're shocked didn't get opportunities and isn't still racing now?
Oh man, I'd have to go back. I'd have to really think of who was there. There's some interesting ones. One that he was really, really young was in it was Chad Boat. Was there. Like, he was really, really young. But he got to drive. Jeremy Clements was at the test. He did a great job, obviously, in the dirt late models as well. I would say, I think Cody Swanson was at the test. It was either Cody or his brother was at the test. It was kind of a surprise that they didn't make it any farther, but it was pretty. It was a pretty deep field of drivers at the time. Obviously, Ryan Hunter-Reay did a great job. It was kind of interesting that he was a guest there and raced and was invited and kind of went back to his open wheel stuff from there.
Yeah, I'm like now imagining like an alternative reality where Ryan Hunter-Reay doesn't win the Indy 500 and he's racing in NASCAR. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, maybe he took over the 24 or something like that after Jeff Gordon retired.
And out of that experience, like you said, you got your Hendrick Motorsports development driver deal. And this was a time when like development driver deals just were like all over the place. I remember there was a time where Hendrick had like 4 guys with Feast and Reed and Krisiloff all at the same time. And there was also like a big season of change though, that like 07 season, like the COT came in. And then I read that you basically spent a lot of your time testing. And what was that scenario like coming in as a young guy and then being like, hey, here's this Cup car, you're going to go run 8 million laps at Nashville?
Yeah, it was incredible. And it was the best thing, for my career, especially because I didn't get to race a lot while I drove for Hendrick. I really only ran part-time in the Xfinity series. We didn't make a big investment in K&N or ARCA or anything like that. So I spent all my time testing, and I drove for every single crew chief plus the R&D team. I drove Jeff Gordon's first COT car to come out of the 24 team shop before Jeff Gordon ever drove it. In fact, my first job reporting for duty at Hendrick was getting picked up at 5 a.m. by Steve Letarte at his house or meeting Steve Letard at his house at 5 a.m. and riding down to Greenville Pickens to test the 24 car. And that was the first time that car had hit the track. So my second job was driving it at Lakeland, and then from there we tested everywhere. And I tested what was the generation before the COT car. I did do some testing with that car as well, but most of my testing was with the COT, and did some incredible tests. I mean, some cool stuff, because back then, there were limitations to testing, but not anything like it is today. So we were at the track a lot. I did everything from simulated 500-mile races, where I just did a 500-mile race at Rockingham, pit stops, all by myself. And I did everything from that to, durability tests, where you just run and run and run until something breaks. A lot of really cool aero tests and different types of parts and things like that they were developing and trying to ABA just parts to see if it would have an impact at a short track or intermediate. One test that always stands out a lot was in Milwaukee. For 2 days. We did nothing but qualifying runs. That was it, just Q runs for 2 days in Milwaukee. And even some 911 red alert tests, where one time Chad Knaus called me at 6 o'clock in the morning and said, "Where are you? We need to go. We need to test right now. And get up, get your helmet, meet us at North Wilkesboro. We need to try a suspension package for the race this weekend at Loudon." And so we went up to North Wilkesboro. I scrambled up there, met the team in the hauler, made some laps, tried a couple different suspension packages. We settled on one that felt the best. And then that weekend they went to New Hampshire and won.
Wow. And just to add context to this, like, this is a time when teams had completely separate testing teams, right? Like, you would have 10 or 12 guys employed just to test. Not like now where there's no testing, and, well, essentially no testing. But do you feel like that testing ban has like helped or like hindered the product we see on the track today?
I think that this is I could really go down a rabbit hole.
Oh, please do.
But I don't know. I'm not sure if it's helped. It's hard to say if it's hurt in terms of cost and things like that, because at the end of the day, these teams spend the money that they have, right? So even though NASCAR puts rules on testing and eliminates testing budgets, those teams still have that budget, and they're going to find a way to spend it, and they're going to find a way to develop a car to go faster. I think as a result of banning testing, it forced that money into the tech departments, like simulation and technologies that are extremely scalable too. So I think that's part of why organizations that find an advantage, they just seem to keep an advantage for some period of time, because technology is really quickly scalable. So when you have a technological advantage in your simulation, you can just build and iterate on that really fast. And it's an extremely efficient process. And I think that's where teams, get almost an entire year advantage on their competition.
I mean, that makes sense, because if you think about it, like, that budget, it's going to go away if the team is like, hey, we don't need that testing budget. Then it's gone forever. They're never going to get that back.
Right.
So they got to keep using that money, or else they'll never see that money again from a sponsor or from the partners that are investing into the team, more or less.
Right. And it's really not until the sponsors don't see value in the entire program that those budgets start coming down. Right. And I think that we're starting to see that in the sport a little bit. So, bigger companies that were spending $30 or $40 million are now trying to do the same thing, but only spend $10 or $15 million. Now, what's important, I think, with the next gen car that NASCAR is really trying to accomplish, and I think they're going to do a good job at it, is making it to where $10 or $15 million can get you a competitive program. And really the key with that is going to be, the first hurdle is manufacturing, right? So we're not going to be manufacturing cars like we used to be. We're not going to be R&D in cars and developing cars because everything's going to be single source. So that's the first step. The second step is going to be the engines, figuring out how to, maybe the engines need to be single source manufactured somehow to where they're crate engines. And then the third step, it'll be interesting to see simulation wise what that can do, or how NASCAR can standardize a simulation or something like that.
And do you see a model
I got kids going crazy in the background? I don't know if you can hear it.
Oh, it's fine.
Yeah, it's actually really it's adorable.
Yeah.
Most people don't know you're a family man. That's kind of it's funny. We're getting the firsthand experience of it right now.
Yep.
I was gonna say, the model that maybe they have in the truck series now, where you see one engine supplier. Do you think that's something that the Cup series is gonna look towards?
I mean, I think we're a ways away from that, but I think that I love engines. I love engine builders. I love making superstars out of those guys. Robert Yates and Doug Yates' engines. The Hendrick engine department, TRD engines. I think that that's such an attractive thing for our product. But if we reach a point where the sponsors and the manufacturers aren't getting a return on that investment, then we have to do something different. Period. We have to pivot. Right now it costs $3.5 to $5 million a year to have a top tier engine program, and that has to be paid for by a sponsor. And if your sponsor is Clorox, you gotta. I think it'd be pretty hard to explain to Clorox how that $5 million spent on rods and pistons, R&D and manufacturing is selling more Clorox. Now if it helps you win races, then that in itself could bring the exposure that sells more of the sponsor's product. But now if the manufacturers are the ones investing in the engines and they're the ones paying for it, and then the components or the R&D or the technology in those engines is driving some value to their core business, then I think that it justifies having a competitive market when it comes to the engines. But I think that the sport and the manufacturers have to get together and look each other and be honest and say, what are we really getting out of these engines and this product? And should we continue to spend more money there to develop it, or should we just standardize it so that it does not run the cost up? And really the same applies to all technologies in our sport. If we're spending, $10 million a year in the wind tunnel developing the bodies and the aerodynamic platforms for these cars, what are we really gaining from that, and where's that money going to come from?
I think a big thing is from our standpoint with sports car racing, how the car on track relates to the street car is always the ROI for a manufacturer standpoint.
Yeah.
And from a sponsor standpoint, it's all about, hey, how much TV time am I getting? How much, mentions am I getting? Those are those ROIs. So, I mean, yeah, it's hard to justify millions, especially in this sport.
But in sports car racing, I mean, so you have what is it, the GTE class, where the car has to be based on a production car, right?
GTD, yeah.
So there's, that right there, even though if you look at the dollars that those manufacturers spend developing those sports cars that get raced, it may not be justified by the viewership, but it's justified because they're actually building a production car that the technology that they develop in those race cars are being used to make billions of dollars.
Yep. Is there still, do you see any return from the stock cars we see on track kind of influencing the street cars we have? Because, I mean, we saw it in the 80s, especially with aerodynamics. As aerodynamics evolved, the race car technology went straight to the production line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I think that that's a really good question for someone at the manufacturer. If you were to talk to like David Wilson or Pat Suey or somebody, Mark Rushbrook from Ford. I'd love to hear from those guys, like what they take from their motorsports stuff. You can just, if you just look at the surface, you can see how invested Toyota is in their TRD brand, right? And how much they use the TRD brand with motorsports, and then how much you see the TRD brand on some of their production cars. There's a lot of crossover there. So, at the very least, there's a lot of branding that they're utilizing. So, hopefully in the future, there are things that they use. I would imagine that there's probably a lot of simulation technology that's useful. And maybe some tire development technology on how they learn how tires interact. I mean, we've invested a lot of money in the sport in simulation and learning about how tires interact as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some crossover there.
All right, we'll get back to the podcast in just a moment. But first, let me tell you about an amazing product that I've come to know from Blue-Emu, and that is Blue-Emu Recovery Bath. Now, this product is amazing. You just drop it right into a nice lukewarm bath, or if you like it cold, you can have it cold too. Just drop the bomb in and kabooey! It doesn't go kabooey, but it will foam and look beautiful and amazing, and then you're just like, whoa. After you're mesmerized, you'll probably want to get in that bath and enjoy maximum relief from Blue-Emu. That's right. So if you had a hard day, a physical day, or you just want to unwind, try a Blue-Emu bath bomb next time you go take a bath. Because I know a majority of you out there have a bath in your home, and you're probably not using it. Blue-Emu! Now back to the podcast.
We mentioned at the beginning, well, we haven't actually mentioned the strange starter thing. So we have to go back and look at some of your strange starts early in your career. So I still remember watching the Gateway race when you made your debut in the Xfinity Series. And you drove the 24 National Guard car. It's crazy I remember this. I have like a photographic memory for useless stuff. Nothing useful. And you ran top 5 the whole night until you got involved in a wreck. I remember that.
Yeah, I know. That race haunts me. I raced so conservative in that race, almost like I raced scared. I was, had a really fast car, and got wrecked by Travis Kittleson, who was driving a one-off race in a Gibbs car, and he wasn't even on the lead lap. Back then, lap down cars started on the inside on restarts, and he missed the corner going into turn 3 on a restart, clipped me and spun me out, sent me into the fence, and that was it. So, I just, that was like a rookie mistake on my part of just not knowing how to race around lap cars. Travis and I also had kind of a little bit of a rivalry coming from super late model racing. It was really weird, that he was the one that wrecked me in my debut when I was running in the top 5. Not that I think that he did it on purpose, but it was almost like he was a rookie racing in the Busch Series. I was a rookie. We had previous history together, and sometimes guys just drive over their head when they're next to somebody that they want to beat.
Yeah, I mean, it's the takeover stage, like you said. When you have the lap cars on the inside, it's always another battle within the battle of the race, because you have to fight them for track position, but then you also have to race around lead lap cars as well. One of my favorite strange starter or just moments was when you're beginning your career, you were getting that seat time in the truck series. You drove for MorganDollar Motorsports in that all-star 2008 year where there was just a bunch of drivers coming in, getting that seat time. You had a lot of good success in that car, in that truck, and you actually were there to see the team transition from David Dollar's ownership to Randy Moss's ownership for Randy Moss Motorsports. Did you remember anything about that during that transition, or was that just kind of out of mind? You were there to drive the truck.
No, I mean, that was one of my first, that was one of my first fortes into a team bringing in an investor, and, a lot of the smoke and mirrors that comes with it too, just constantly every day hearing like, oh, he's going to spend a bunch of money, or we're going to work on next year engine programs and this and that. And, not really that, I was 18 years old, so I didn't really know how the business worked that was my first time of like learning that. And also I brought GoDaddy into NASCAR in those first few truck races. I wouldn't have run those truck races if it weren't for the GoDaddy sponsorship that I had. They covered really half of the cost. The other half of the cost came from Chevy. I called Pat Suey at Chevrolet myself and said, "Hey, I really want to run these truck races. I think it'll help me. I need to do better on the Xfinity side. Can you help me with the engine bill?" And so Chevy covered the engine bill for all the truck races that I ran.
That's pretty good. I mean, that was at one point the all-star Chevy team too for like several years in the mid 2000s. So I'm pretty sure Pat and MorganDollar had MorganDollar Motorsports had like a connection already in the past too. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, they had a good relationship and we ran really well. Eric Phillips was my crew chief, who obviously is extremely successful at Gibbs now, and has had a really good career. He's a guy that really wish I could have worked with him more in my career. He's probably one of my favorite crew chiefs.
Did you get to meet Randy Moss though?
Yeah, I met him. Yeah, he was a pretty cool dude. But it's you just never know like what was really going on with those athlete deals and stuff.
Yeah, because like we're doing some research on that, and it's like interesting how the rumors, like you see how they were spreading even around that time with like a month before Randy announced that he had the team. It was just like circulation and speculations for a long time. It's like, is it or is it not? So it must be much more stressful when you're have a role in it, like yourself as the driver.
Yep. Yeah, it was. I mean, for me, I didn't know if it was determined, where I was going to drive the next year and if I had a job or not.
And after 2000, you speak about having a job or not. Like after 2008, like you did those Xfinity races, you won Rookie of the Year. Congratulations, by the way. I don't know who else were you up against that year, because you only ran 17 or 18 races, right?
Yeah, I think I was up against Brian Clausen, who was my closest in points in the Rookie of the Year, and Dario Franchitti as well. So it was pretty interesting because all three of us were part-time though, but we all ran kind of equal number of races. So it was a really unique Rookie of the Year campaign. But I finished sixth at Phoenix, which was my last race of the season, and it put me ahead in points. And then going into Homestead, I was not scheduled to drive, but as long as Brian didn't finish in the top 10, I was clear. I had clinched the title. So, Brian was a good friend of mine for many years, and he was a really special dude. And we spent a lot of time together during that season.
In going into 2009, you only ran one race the whole season. So what else was going on that season? Just lots of testing?
Yeah, lots of testing, and I ran some late model stuff for Port City, drove the house car at Port City Race Cars, and ran my one race for James Finch.
And that's when like we kind of get to this sort of this strange start, kind of interesting part of your career where you're driving for a bunch of different teams. Like post 2009, you kind of end up. It's an interesting time in NASCAR when teams have started to figure out that maybe we qualify, run 3 laps, and park the car. And I personally like believe it's the most brilliant strategy in the history of NASCAR because it's all about making money, right? Mm-hmm. So can you kind of walk us through, because you were with Phoenix and TRG and we're sports car guys, so we know all about TRG, and Larry Gunselman's team. Can you walk us through like how you arrived in that situation and then like the economics of a start and park operation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's spend less than you make. That's pretty much the business plan. You got to make those races. If you miss a couple of races in a row, then you're pretty much back to square one. So, but those teams were making a lot of money back then. I think the most genuine guys at it were guys like James Finch, who he was using it to fund his Xfinity program, and he was using it to build the foundation for a Cup team that ultimately ran full-time for several years, and built into a pretty competitive Cup program. So, um, for Mike Hillman and Larry Gunzelman's program, Joe Falk. I mean, those guys, that program is what built into the 33 and the 40 program that I drove for when Mike Hillman spun out of Germain Racing and did his own thing. So they all kind of had their reasons for doing it, and I think that was the if you look at every start and park program, every one of them had some touch of real racer in it, whereas like these weren't guys with deep pockets. They weren't just going to spend $10 million in one season and all of a sudden be a cup team. They had to earn it.
And what's the game plan though? So you go into a race, like what if there's a big crash on like the third lap? Is it like, okay, now we're going to run some more laps? Or like, is there a set lap you decide? Or do you get to the end of a set of tires and then park, or what?
It just depended on the deal and the situation. Some of those guys, they didn't really like parking early. Like Finch, I think that he was almost just a competitive enough guy that he was like, yeah, we might be starting parking, but by God, we're going to beat all the other starting parks. So you could almost always count on us running longer than the rest of the starting park teams. For TRG, when I drove for them, that was Kevin Buckler, who didn't want to admit that he was a starting park team. So, we would almost run half the races just because he didn't want to consistently be going out on lap 10. We would go 100 laps into the race. It almost seemed like he didn't want to be going back and telling people that he was starting parking. He would have rather looked like he was having mechanical failures on his car than starting parking. But it's all, like I said, it's all dollars and cents, I guess.
I still remember you on Twitter congratulating Robbie Gordon's team after Dover one time that they won the start and park race by finishing 36th. They were the top finishing team that parked. I still remember that.
Wow, you just reminded me of something. I don't remember that. I'll have to find that tweet.
Yeah, like, was there like, did that happen between the start and park teams? Was it like a pride thing where it's like, they're going to run 47 laps, so we're going to run 50? Like you said, like, I guess Buckler liked
it wasn't. It wasn't a pride thing. It was actually a real thing there for a while because in an effort to discourage start and parking, NASCAR set a rule that you would get tore down if you were like, it could have been a range of things. I can't exactly remember, but at one point it might have been if you finish 37th or worse, you get tore down. If you don't complete half the race, you get tore down. Like they were using tear down as what am I trying to say? Decentivizing us from starting parking. So, which tearing down the cars meant maybe taking the engine apart or doing things that would really cost the teams time, effort, money. So there was a while where, we were trying not to be the 37th place team. You had to make sure that you outran guys.
I mean, something that you did outran a lot of competitors in was when you were at BK Racing. I mean, that's probably one of your most underrated full-time years in Cup. You worked with Doug Richards, which I'm pretty sure that was a breath of fresh air for a bit to get like someone with a lot of knowledge who was going to be consistent with you week in and week out. What was it like driving at BK, and especially as the year evolved and getting the skew of the car, like down path for aero? What was that like developing that team?
That was a lot of fun, especially with Doug, because Doug, I've always said in a 45-minute happy hour session when you just, and this is before simulation for us, there were other people running simulation, but in a 45-minute happy hour session when it's crew chief and driver, 2 sets of tires, and you dial your car in, I want nobody other than Doug Richard in that scenario. Him and I made so much progress in happy hour sessions together that year. He just was so good at dissecting what I was saying and making the right adjustments. And there were so many times that we would go 4, 5, 6 adjustments in a row where it just was like help the car over and over again. And that's pretty rare sometimes in Cup. A lot of times you'll go weeks in a row and you won't hit something on the car in happy hour that actually improves it. So that part of it was a lot of fun. The skew, the development there was a lot of fun too. The cars still had big flat sides on them. We were getting the cars towed out more and more, and then NASCAR really put a limitation on that. So that's when we started running the track bars really high on the right side. And one of the first iterations of that was, you would run the track bar really, really high on the right side, really, really low on the left side, which would require you to lengthen the track bar to get your rear end housing back square. And so your track bar was super, super long. Well, then when the car would travel and the right side track bar would come down, it would just shove the rear end housing to the left and the body to the right. And the car felt really weird to drive. Like, it was super sketchy and weird, but once you got the car out there, it felt like there was tons of grip. So for some reason, we got that figured out really quickly. And we paired that with a rear sway bar too at the time. So we were really fast on some of the high speed intermediates. We qualified 9th at Michigan, just straight up with a BK racing ride, put it P9 on the grid. It was pretty cool.
Hey, I mean, you made those cars look as good as they did with the wraps, with the smoothie wraps, because it looked official. It looked like official team, but we all knew like everything was kind of going on with the BK behind the closed doors. But for you to have the success in that team, it spoke a lot to your driving ability, but also, like you said, working with Doug and just getting good happy hour sessions in. It's always good to go into race day knowing that you found something in the last practice session.
Yeah, we definitely did that a lot. He was one of the best.
So
go ahead, James. No, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I was going to jump to 2016 because there's a moment that a lot of people don't talk about, which was when you were at Bristol in that Front Row Motorsports ride, number 38, Snap Fitness. Like you said, you don't go in and you market yourself. You brought a sponsor that you had with the 40 car with Snap Fitness over, and you did a lot of cool things. I remember one thing you did that year was the whole T-shirt giveaway. I still have that Level Up 38 shirt and everything.
Nice.
So thanks for that. But when you led 20 laps at Bristol, man, that's your favorite track. And you went out there with older tires and you held off Carl Edwards. And it seemed like Mike Joy got choked up in the call when he was calling it. He was enjoying it. What was that like after the fact?
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, just getting that track position and making that happen was so cool. It was just something that was really hard to do and hard to do, especially now with the traction compound on the bottom groove, because faster cars back then would have been able to just pass me on the bottom, but the top side was literally like 4/10 faster than the bottom, so I was able to just jump out in the lead and hold on to it. So that was incredible. I mean, I loved that drive, and every configuration that I've ever driven at Bristol, that place is still special and still great.
Right on, man.
And we'll ask you, so kind of coming towards like, more recent times, I saw today you actually, there was an article written about drivers that could replace Bubba Wallace in the 43 car, and your name was on there. And you did mention that you are just 31 years old. So
yeah. You
gonna get a tattoo of Richard Petty's name on your arm and go drive the 43 or what?
Well, I think that those things have to happen in inverse of each other. So if I get the ride, I'll get the tattoo, 100%. I think it'd look good, like right here or something like that, right where he signed it on Bubba's arm. Maybe a little bit smaller though. I don't know if I'd do it like this big, but that would be pretty sweet. I'd love to drive the 43 car. I mean, that would just be incredible opportunity. I think, I know that team worked really, really hard to keep Bubba. And I don't think Bubba did them wrong by any means. I mean, he's got a lot of opportunity right now to put himself in a position to win races, and that might be where he's headed. I don't know. But those guys, they invested a lot in Bubba. They've proven, that they can step up their program. I think that the whole organization, including Bubba, doesn't get enough credit for how well they've run in the last couple of years. So Yeah, I think it would be tough to hop in that car and do as well as Bubba, but I'd be up for the challenge. I would love to do it, and that'd be an awesome destination.
And speaking like of Twitter, so your Twitter account's infamous among active NASCAR fans on Twitter. You know, NASCAR Twitter is a great community. It can also be a dark place, but overall, it's a great community to communicate with drivers, crew members. You know, and you tweet a lot about one of my favorite things is the Show Car Hall of Fame. Can you tell us about the Show Car Hall of Fame?
Yeah, the Show Car Hall of Fame, man. I'm just a big fan of the sport. I'm a fan of all forms of marketing of our sport, and
Like the cup that James has behind him.
yep, yeah, yes.
That's the greatest piece of branding ever. I don't even know if you could name the design awards that were won from this, but I've been entered in some of those, and I'm just like, yeah, that gods. But go on, Landon.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm just a fan of the sport, fan of all kinds of marketing in the sport, and really proud to to showcase some of our best replicas of on-track race cars. So the Show Car Hall of Fame is my curation of those of those pieces.
What's your favorite collection? What favorite piece in that collection so far, and probably like a piece you want in that collection?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't want any of them. Yeah, I don't definitely don't want to own any of them. It's a look but don't touch type of thing. I think the all-time greatest for me is the Big Machine Brickyard car with the splitter brackets.
Yeah, on the Gen 4 car.
On the Gen 4 car, and yeah, that one is definitely one of the all-time greats. I always go back to that one, especially because I felt like I made a pretty serious campaign directly to the top of Indianapolis Motor Speedway for them to update their show car program. So because of that car, that they definitely knew where I stood with that car, and I have had a specific conversation with the president of IMS about that program. So that one holds a special place in my heart.
And Roger Penske's in charge now, so hopefully he'll be able to fix that.
Yeah, that's right.
That just makes me scratch my head. Like, how much racing experience did that person have before they got that job? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you got to be careful. They're all people like us. They're all everybody's out there. They all have their resources. That's why I choose to enjoy it. And
we all come from different walks and backgrounds
to
get where we are.
That's right.
So as long as we learn, that's
different things when we see a show car.
Oh yeah.
And the past few seasons,
I'm accepting of all show cars, though, just so everybody knows.
I've seen some really bad ones up here, like like at a Napa dealership. You should see some of the ones that we have.
Yep.
Oh my god.
Yeah, usually if you get to if you're at a restaurant that has a show car or something like that,
yes.
It's gonna be a gem.
Even I remember going to the NASCAR. In Vegas, they had a NASCAR shop inside one of the hotels. What hotel was it? Yep. And that was even terrible. And that was like an official NASCAR shop. Like, God.
Yep.
So what I have here is, I think, Mark, you've seen it, but on I'm in St. Petersburg. So on 34th Street North, there's this place called Smokin' 19, because it's State Road 19. They have a Gen 5 stock car out there that looks like it's towing the pit boss, and I mean, it's been outside just rotting for years. They finally just wrapped it this year. It looks nicer. I've never been able to see it like in person, just as I pass it by, but it's doing a great job. It's doing its service.
That's good.
Yes.
Last few seasons, though, Landon, you were driving for Starcom, and it's a team that Derek Cope's involved in, and you're racing the Cup Series, and again, like we talked about BK, like you had some pretty remarkable results given the situation. I remember 20th at Bristol in 2018, and 18th at Vegas, 11th at Daytona, and do you think that's really just a credit to all of your experience driving some of the less than stellar equipment that you're just able to get the most out of it?
I definitely think as a professional, I've learned, where to find opportunity in the Cup Series from that perspective. I think it takes a really special perspective to to drive a car where you know your limitations and what it's capable of, but still maximize the finishing position and the risk reward because of the damage on the car as well. I mean, in a lot of cases, those teams cannot justify paying a driver if that driver is going to do just as much damage to the car every week that they do in your salary. They might as well just take a driver that's willing to pay to drive the car or a rent-a-ride program. So, I think that I just over time, it's proven more that maybe my niche as a race car driver in some of these cases is a guy that's a builder. And I fit really well into programs that need to be sort of like gelled together and built and set up for further success.
So, like, if I need to evaluate my program, I call Landon Cassill, is what you're saying.
Yeah, maybe it's whether you need to evaluate it or you're just trying to put it together and you're saying, like, we need a constant, somebody that's going to succeed and be consistent and put this thing together. So, I'd love to do that at the highest level and do it and win a championship. But I've seemed to really make a career out of doing it for people that are trying to build their programs from the ground up.
Have you been able to do that, like, with Morgan Shepherd's Xfinity team? Because I know you've had some, like, pretty remarkable, like, qualifying runs with that team. Yeah. And that's a team, like, most people see as bottom of the barrel, and forgive the term, like, not successful at all. And you've done very well given the situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a little bit different of a scenario where, Morgan definitely needs a lot of help, needs a lot of sponsorship to really get that team to where it needs to be. But that's a scenario where I think it was just a hidden gem. I think that Morgan has good equipment. I mean, we has one car, right? So when I say he has good equipment, it's not like there's this hidden palace full of, manufacturing of the best race cars in the world. Like, he just has one car, he has one engine, he's got one of everything, and it's good stuff. And I mean, a guy, he's proof that you don't race for 60 years without at least knowing something about motorsports. And driving his car was a little bit of something that I think a lot of people overlooked. And when I first got asked to drive his car, I was skeptical of it. I didn't know Morgan. I didn't know what he had, but I took one look at his stuff and I was just like, man, I think I can actually make this car go. And sure enough, it had a ton of speed.
And the other thing I wanted to kind of ask you about is, did you get sent an award when GQ named you the most stylish driver in NASCAR? Did they send you like a trophy or a plaque?
No trophy. I just think that's a good headline for SEO.
I mean, it's very fitting of you because, to be frank, you are always styling, always got some kind of gentleman look about you. You're very dapper with your portrayer, but it's always casual. It's not too much. Mm-hmm. There's always a little bit of class there, and your hair is always on fleek, even right now with all the humidity probably you're facing.
Thank you. Yep.
What's brought you to be like that? You're more in touch with style and just looking good. What's brought that upon you? Just for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just maybe a personality trait. I like fashion. I like clothes and menswear, and I follow menswear blogs and podcasts, and have friends in that world. So it was cool to actually like be recognized in GQ because of that, and be written, have an article written about me. But yeah, it's kind of always been that way, and I've been on both sides of it. I've been asked to tone it down at the track, and asked to step it up before. So I don't know. That's just part of being a race car driver. Sometimes team owners are never happy. They always want something different, but yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy dressing up and looking good, presentable at least.
But was there like me of everyone? There's no one who's more stylish than I am in all of NASCAR. Like, considering guys like Jimmy Johnson and Jeff Gordon that have Jimmy Johnson and Jeff Gordon bank. Well, they have like bank accounts that allow them to be crazy styling.
Right.
They hire their own stylist, basically.
Yeah, Jimmy Johnson's got a good stylist. I don't know, it might be his wife or he has a stylist, but Jimmy Johnson always dresses well. Jeff Gordon dresses well. Brad Keselowski actually dresses really well. People don't realize that. Yeah. But Brad has a good stylist too, so.
There's the secret.
There you go. I was going to ask you too, you were tweeting quite a bit about it. I wanted to ask, your family business was ravaged by a big storm in Cedar Rapids. And how's the process been trying to get the business back on its feet and reopened?
It's going well. I mean, the business is good right now. It's just the building is kind of half in operation. It needs a new roof, it needs AC, needs tons of drywall, and they're putting it together and selling cars at the same time.
That's awesome. Yeah. And one more thing, sir, just to go along with your GQ is like, you're obviously a guy who's very in touch with fitness as well. You had Snap Fitness as a sponsor. And I remember you running the half marathon after the Coke 600 and doing some marathons. And you've done Ironmans as well, I believe.
Yeah.
Remember you having to miss races in Xfinity, right? To go and do an Ironman at one point?
I'm trying to think if I've actually missed an Xfinity race to do a half Ironman. But I've done a little bit of both. So in fact, I did a half Ironman and a cup race in the same day in 2015.
Why? Why would you do that?
I raced the Xfinity race on a Friday night. On Saturday morning, I did a half Ironman. On Saturday night, I did a cup race. It was pretty incredible. I was in incredible shape at the time. And probably would never do that again.
But why? Why just to be like, hey, look at me, I ran a that's insane.
Yep.
I mean that is an ultimate flex, but one thing we know you like to flex is you've been flexing a little bit on Twitch. You've been streaming a bit, and our partners are your partners as well. Blue-Emu's been teaming up with your switches. I was enjoying a couple of them while you were doing it. How's that been? Has that been good to interact with fans on a different level? Because we know you like to be very genuine with your interactions with fans.
I love it, man. It is so personal. It's so awesome. You can't fake it. And so it actually, to me, the fact that it's live and personal and you can't fake it is a little bit of just a check of just, hey, am I being who, am I being myself? And am I okay with who I am? I need to make sure that that I project that who I am is a good person. So I think that live, streaming live is a good thing.
And then the iRacing stuff is you've been, obviously you're doing a lot of that. It's become very popular. Is that something you've had your whole career, or just something you started doing recently?
Well, I've been in iRacing for a long time, so this is just a huge opportunity to really step it up. So I've enjoyed it. It's been a great year. Blue-Emu's been an incredible partner. I think that there's a bright future for us to continue working together, and hopefully something can come out of it.
No, that's good, man. And we appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to a podcast that 12 people listen to. That's great.
We're growing. We're getting the right ears. And
you'll get there. You guys, thanks for having me.
Blue-Emu did not force him to be here, folks. He came here of his own free will, just so you know.
You got it.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, man. We really appreciate it. And best of luck with everything. And hopefully we see you on the grid next year. We're all hoping for you. We're all big fans.
You got it. Talk to you later.
All right. Take care,
Thanks,
man.
Landon.
Bye.